My elder sister hates me so much that she poisoned my only child because she had none. The afternoon sun streamed through our kitchen window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. My 6-year-old daughter Chloe sat at the table, her small tongue peeking out in concentration as she carefully colored a princess. "Look, Mommy, it's you," she declared, holding up a vibrant purple and gold masterpiece. Elena smiled, my heart swelling with a love so profound it sometimes stole my breath. As a botanical researcher, I appreciated her vibrant choice of colors. My older sister, Irene, watched from the doorway, a tight, practiced smile on her lips. "How precious," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "You're so lucky, Lena." There was a strange weight to her words, a hollow echo I'd grown accustomed to since her last round of IVF had failed. She came over often these days, a constant, elegant presence in our lives. I mistook her quiet observation for lonely affection. I didn't yet see it for the quiet, gathering storm it was. It started subtly, a cough that lingered longer than a common cold, a tiredness that nap time couldn't fix. "She's just growing, Lena," my husband, Ben, reassured me, but a mother's instinct hummed a low, warning note. Irene became a fixture in our home, bringing soups and offering to watch Chloe so I could rest. She'd sit for hours, reading to Chloe, her hand often stroking my daughter's hair. I was grateful for the help. Then the headaches began. Chloe would wake up crying, her small hands pressed to her temples. Doctors' visits became routine. "Viral," they said, "unexplained migraines." Irene was always there in the waiting room, a pillar of support. "You're such a wonderful mother," she'd tell me, her eyes oddly dry. The praise felt like a judgment. My perfect picture was developing a crack, and I was the only one who seemed to see it. Chloe's vibrant energy faded into a worrying lethargy. Her teacher called, concerned about her lack of focus in kindergarten. She called me Aunt Irene by mistake one day, and my sister's smile was a flash of something triumphant before it softened into sympathy. "The poor, confused darling," she'd croon. Ben started working later, the stress of a sick child and a frantic wife wearing him down. I stopped my own botanical research, my world narrowing to doctors' appointments and frantic Google searches. I was drowning, and Irene was the one holding my head above water, all while whispering to my mother that I was becoming hysterical. The seeds of doubt were sown, and I felt myself starting to believe them. Was I imagining the severity? Was it all in my head? The psychological warfare had begun, and I was losing the battle in my own mind. The seizure happened on a Tuesday. One moment Chloe was watching cartoons, the next her small body was rigid, her eyes rolled back. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and terror. In the stark white hospital room, surrounded by beeping machines, my world shattered. Irene arrived within minutes, her face a mask of perfect, tragic concern. She held my hand as doctors ran tests, her grip firm, almost possessive. "We'll get through this, sister," she whispered. Ben was pale and silent, his faith in me visibly shaken. The doctors were baffled. "Unexplained neurological episodes," they called it. I sat by Chloe's bedside, stroking her limp hand, a cold, hard certainty forming in my gut. This was not a natural illness. Someone had done this, and the only person with constant, unquestioned access was the one now handing me a cup of coffee, her eyes full of false tears. It was a subtle scent, clinging to Irene's fingers as she handed me a tissue. Floral but unfamiliar, sweet with a bitter, almost chemical undertone. My botanist's brain, dormant for weeks, flickered to life. It nagged at me as I watched her smooth Chloe's hospital blanket, her movements precise, reverent. Later, when she went to the cafeteria, I looked through her leather handbag, my hands trembling with a sick guilt. Beneath her wallet and keys, I found it. A single, crushed, trumpet-shaped petal, ivory white with delicate violet veins. My blood ran cold. Brugmansia, angel's trumpet. A beautiful, deadly plant I had studied for its potent tropine alkaloids. In controlled microdoses, it had medical potential. In accumulation, it caused hallucinations, paralysis, and death. The pieces of the horrifying puzzle slammed together. The devoted aunt was a poisoner. I told the doctors I needed air. I went straight to my closed-down lab, the key turning with a familiar click. The silence was accusing. I had Chloe's latest blood and hair samples taken for independent analysis. My hands, usually so steady, shook as I prepared the tests. The gas chromatograph hummed, separating compounds, searching for a ghost. Hours later, the results glowed on the screen. scopolamine, atropine, the unmistakable fingerprint of brugmansia. Low-dose, chronic administration, designed to mimic a degenerative illness. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a meticulous, slow-motion murder. My sister hadn't just envied my life. She had decided to systematically dismantle it, starting with the most precious piece. The grief was a physical blow, followed by a rage so pure and cold it felt like ice in my veins. I stood in the hospital bathroom, staring at my reflection, a pale, hollowed-out version of the woman I used to be. Tears threatened, but the ice in my veins froze them. Crying wouldn't save my daughter. Revenge wouldn't either, but it would be my compass, my fuel. Irene's motive was clear now. A childless woman's bitter, pathological jealousy. She didn't want to just take Chloe from me. She wanted to make me suffer, to watch me fail as a mother, to prove she would have been better. She wanted the experience of motherhood so desperately she was willing to steal it, even if it meant presiding over a funeral. Well, I would give her an experience she would never forget. I would build her a palace of hope on a foundation of lies, and I would be the one to light the match. Chloe, thank God, began a slow, fragile recovery once the poison was identified and treated. The doctors, now aware of the cause, called it a miraculous response to new medication. I let them believe that. I never mentioned the petal or the tests. To the world, especially to Irene, I was a grateful, exhausted sister. The day we brought Chloe home, I embraced Irene, letting my body go limp against hers. I couldn't have done it without you, I sobbed, the performance sickening and perfect. I was so wrong to be suspicious. You're the only one who understood. I felt her stiffen, then relax, her arms wrapping around me in a victor's embrace. She thought she had won. She thought she had broken me. She had no idea she was now the subject of my most important study. I began my campaign of calculated vulnerability. I called Irene daily, crying about my fears of relapse, my strained marriage, my inability to cope. I made her my confidant, my rock. I fed her importance. After 2 months, I set the hook. Irene, I whispered over coffee, my voice trembling with feigned excitement. I haven't told anyone, but my contacts in Switzerland. They've made a breakthrough, a new fertility treatment. It's completely secret, but I pulled every string. I got you in. The change in her was instantaneous. Her eyes, usually so guarded, widened with raw, desperate hope. For me, she breathed. I nodded, squeezing her hand. After all you've done for me, for Chloe, it's the least I can do. I was offering a starving woman a feast, and she didn't once question why the chef was her intended victim. The treatment started. I converted a spare room in my house into a mock clinic, using my scientific equipment to create an air of sterile legitimacy. The serum I injected into her hip was a harmless saline solution, colored with a drop of herbal tea. I created fake patient files, forged emails from a Dr. Richter in Geneva, and fabricated progress charts showing rising hormone levels. Irene, desperate to believe, felt every phantom symptom I suggested. You might feel some nausea today, that's a good sign, I'd say, and an hour later, she'd text me about her morning sickness. Her hope was a palpable, growing thing. I was not just her doctor, I was her creator, building the dream that would destroy her. The pinnacle of the illusion was the pregnancy test. I obtained a real one from a pregnant colleague and carefully altered the result window to show a faint positive. I placed it in a clean, clinical baggie. When I handed it to her after her weekly injection, her hands shook so violently she could barely hold it. She stared at the 2 lines, her face undergoing a transformation. Years of bitterness, envy, and sorrow melted away, replaced by a radiant, disbelieving joy. She wept, hugging me, calling me her miracle worker. I held her, my face buried in her shoulder, my own expression stone cold. This was the peak of the mountain I had built for her. The view was magnificent. The fall would be catastrophic. Irene's pregnancy became her entire identity. She announced it to the world with a triumphant glow. My parents were overjoyed. Ben was cautiously happy, though he watched me with a new, uncertain look. I orchestrated it all. I hosted the gender reveal party, a girl, of course. I went with her to fake ultrasound appointments, where I showed her images I had digitally altered from online sources. I narrated the growth of her baby, describing tiny hands and feet, building the phantom limb of a child in her mind. She bought a nursery's worth of clothes, her happiness a shield against the world she had tried to destroy. Every gift she received, every congratulation was another brick in the wall I would tear down. As the due date approached, the pressure mounted. Irene's joy became tinged with a frantic anxiety. "Are you sure everything's all right, Lena? She doesn't feel as active today," she'd fret. I would calmly reassure her, citing perfectly normal third trimester lulls. I began subtly laying the groundwork for the final act. I'd mention, in passing, how strange it was that Chloe's illness had vanished so completely. I'd wonder aloud about the rare allergen the doctors never identified. I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes, but her all-consuming focus on her own miracle blinded her to the trap being set around her. She was living in a house of cards, and I was the wind, waiting for the right moment to blow. I planned the baby shower with meticulous detail. It was to be the social event of the season, a testament to Irene's triumphant motherhood. I chose a venue she had always coveted, filled it with white lilies and soft pink roses. Everyone who was anyone was there, including our entire family and all our old friends. Irene held court, radiant in a flowing blue gown, her hand resting on her perfectly round prosthetic belly. She accepted gifts with tears of joy, her gaze constantly seeking me out, full of gratitude. I smiled back, a glass of champagne in my hand, my heart a drum of cold anticipation. The stage was set. The audience was enraptured. The villain was at the height of her power. It was time for the curtain to fall. The room fell quiet as I was called upon to give the toast. I tapped my glass, the gentle chime silencing the cheerful chatter. I looked out at the sea of smiling, expectant faces, then let my gaze settle on Irene. Her eyes shone with love and trust. "My dear sister," I began, my voice soft and clear, amplified by the microphone. "This has been such a journey for all of us, a journey of hope, of miracles." I paused, letting the warmth in the room swell. "It reminds me of another journey. The journey of my daughter, Chloe, back to health." A slight, confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Irene's smile tightened. I had her attention. The real performance was about to begin. "My daughter was poisoned," I stated, my voice flat and cold, devoid of all emotion. The room went utterly silent. "Not by a stranger, not by accident. She was slowly, methodically poisoned by someone in this family. Someone who used a rare plant, Angel's Trumpet, to make her sick, to make her suffer, to make her die." Gasps erupted. Ben stared at me, horrified. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Irene had gone pale, her knuckles white as she gripped her chair. "No," she whispered, but the microphone picked it up. "The poisoner," I continued, my voice rising, "was the devoted aunt. The one who held my hand in the hospital. The one who pretended to care. My sister, Irene." Chaos erupted. Irene stood, her face a mask of outraged denial. "She's lying, she's insane with jealousy," she screamed. I didn't flinch. I clicked a small remote. The screens around the room, which had been showing ultrasound photos, now displayed the lab reports, the chemical signatures of the poison, the timeline of administration. Then I showed a photo of the crushed petal from her purse. The evidence was irrefutable, scientific, and damning. The crowd's shock turned from me to her. I let the truth hang in the air for a long, terrible moment before I turned my gaze back to Irene, my eyes locking with hers. "And this," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm, "this miracle you're carrying, this child you love more than anything." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "It doesn't exist." I clicked the remote again. The screens showed the fake email chains with Dr. Richter, the altered ultrasound sources, the formula for the saline solution. "There is no Swiss clinic. There is no baby. Every injection, every symptom, every kick. It was all me. I gave you the only child you will ever have, Irene. A phantom, a lie. You will never be a mother, but you will always be the monster who tried to murder a little girl." The sound that tore from Irene's throat was not human. It was a raw, guttural scream of absolute, soul-crushing agony. She clawed at the prosthetic belly, tearing it from her body and hurling it to the floor as she collapsed. The room descended into absolute bedlam. My mother fainted. Guests were crying, shouting. Through the chaos, I saw Irene curled on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, her perfect world and her perfect lie shattered into a million pieces around her. The psychological blow was complete. I had not just taken away her freedom, I had annihilated her reality. I had given her everything she wanted and proven it was nothing at all. The police arrived. I handed them a complete dossier, The lab reports, the petal, a timeline of her access to Chloe, and a recorded confession I had elicited during one of our therapy sessions where she'd confided her fears about being a mother heavily implicating herself. She was arrested, but she was already gone, lost in a catatonic state, broken by the revelation. The public scandal was immense. The woman who had tried to kill her niece for a child that never existed. The news headlines wrote my revenge for me. I felt no triumph, only a vast, hollow exhaustion. The monster was caged, but her shadow would always linger. Life slowly began again. Ben and I entered a strained, quiet reconciliation, the trust between us fractured but not broken. He had never known, and my deception haunted him as much as Irene's crime. We focused on Chloe, who grew stronger and more vibrant with each passing day, the poison's shadow finally receding. The color returned to her cheeks, her laughter once again filled our home. I watched her play in the garden, a profound, weary gratitude settling over me. The battle was over. The war had cost me my sister, a part of my marriage, and a piece of my soul, but my child was safe. That was the only victory that truly mattered. I went to see Irene at the psychiatric facility once. She sat by a window, staring at nothing. She was thin, her elegance stripped away, leaving a hollow shell. She didn't look at me when I entered. "There was no baby," she whispered to the window pane, her voice flat. "There was never a baby." I didn't answer. I had nothing left to say to her. I had taken my revenge, and it had left us both in our own private hells. Hers was one of shattered delusion. Mine was one of a love so fierce it had turned me into a creature of cold, calculated cruelty. I stood for a moment longer, then turned and walked away, leaving the ghost of my sister with the ghost of her child. I returned to my botanical research, but my focus had shifted. I began studying antidotes, developing rapid toxicity tests, turning the weapon that had hurt my family into a tool to protect others. My work gained a new, profound purpose. At home, I learned to laugh again, truly laugh with Ben and Chloe. We took a trip to the beach, and I watched as she splashed in the waves, fearless and full of life. The memory of the hospital, of the poison, of my revenge, was a scar, a part of me, but no longer an open wound. I had reclaimed my life, not as the woman I was before, but as someone stronger, harder, and fiercely protective of the light I had almost lost. On Chloe's 7th birthday, she handed me a drawing. It was of 3 stick figures under a large sun. "That's you, me, and Daddy," she said, pointing. Then she pointed to a small, dark scribble in the corner, almost off the page. "And that's the sad shadow that went away." My breath caught. Children see everything. I hugged her tightly, my fierce, resilient girl. The revenge had been for me a necessary poison to counteract a greater one. But this healing, this love, this unbreakable bond was for us. It was the true resolution, the only thing that could truly mend the broken pieces of our family. I stood in my greenhouse months later, tending to a new specimen, a resilient, healing aloe plant, a world away from the deadly brugmansia. The air was warm and smelled of damp earth and life. I thought of Irene, of the intricate, terrible garden of lies I had cultivated just for her. I was a gardener of a different sort now. I had learned that some weeds cannot be pulled, they must be uprooted with fire. My revenge was the fire. It had scorched the earth, but it had allowed new, stronger things to grow. I looked out at my daughter, healthy and whole, and knew the price had been worth it. The chapter was closed. The story was over, and we were finally truly free.